1826. I would be amazed if you didn't. They may not be there now. The current one, I think, has Winston Churchill on it. But that is a £5 note. And it's a £5 note, and I'm very proud to say there are 4 Gurneys on that £5 note. And that is, the person in the centre there is Elizabeth Fry in Newgate, and it's taken off that picture there. And she was my great-great-aunt, and she grew up at Earlham, just outside Norwich, which I'll come to in a minute. And she was a prison reformer. And one of the roles of High Sheriff is actually to go into prisons and have a look at something. So I'm going to just take something out, and this is a book on notes on a visit made to some of the prisons in Scotland and the north of England in company with Elizabeth Fry by Joseph John Gurney in 1819. And this is a piece from here, and this is, I promise you, this is relevant. And this is on Berwick Borough Jail, but this is a description of all the jails in Scotland. Nothing can be much more defective than this small prison. It consists of 2 large boarded rooms in the upper story of the courthouse, one for debtors, the other for criminals, a simple wooden door between them. Connected with these day rooms is a small range of sleeping cells. The whole prison is so exceedingly insecure that the criminals cannot be permitted to make use of their day rooms except in the prison's presence of the jailer. Thus, they are almost constantly confined in their comfortless sleeping cells. Just to tell you that at the moment, over the last 2 years, a very large number of the prisoners in all 3 prisons in Norfolk are staying 23 hours a day in their cells. That is just one of the very small things I have found, and that was 1819. Earlham Hall. Earlham Hall is now the School of Law at the University of East Anglia. If you drive into the front entrance of the UEA, it's over on the right by Earlham Park. Indeed, I've gone into there to try to ensure that they are connected to the police, the CPS and the courts, because they weren't particularly. And here is a good-looking man called Joseph John Gurney. Sorry, it's just dropped off at the left. And he was a Quaker, and he was an extraordinary man, and he's my great-great-grandfather. And he went and lectured all over America, but more appositely, he was one of the founders of the anti-slavery movement. And so he worked with Elizabeth Fry against prisons, for prison reform, and on the anti-slavery movement, which was led largely by the Quakers. And indeed, that is Quaker Meeting House in Norwich, and that is, if none of you know it, it's in Lower Goat Lane. In fact, it was a staggering thing. It was all paid for by the Gurney family in 1826, and all the windows are sufficiently high so that nobody could look into the meetings. And it is the most beautiful building, and I strongly commend you to go in there. But it was incredibly important politically in that it was the driving centre for the whole of the anti-slavery movement for about 10 years. So Wilberforce passed the Slave Trade Act, stopping the movement of slaves between Africa and Americas. But actually, it was the 1833 Act that stopped slavery. And you will recognise some of those images. Am I Not a Man and a Brother was all about the Anti-Slavery Act. This was driven by Quaker and Church of England theology. it became an extraordinary movement. There was a riot in St Andrew's Hall, hard to imagine now, isn't it? And Norwich was one of the main centres for driving change. And when it got passed, that was one of the places that happened. But Northrop's Hall, mile and a half up there, is where all the votes were counted. There were 137,000 signatures on the ladies' signature roll alone that was put into number 10 Downing Street, and they were all laid out on the dining room table at Northrop's Hall. And they were all counted and then rolled up and taken by coach and horses down to Downing Street. Just to say, this little part of the world has played a really important role in history. And this is the man who actually enabled that act to happen, and a Buxton, married to a Gurney, nothing changes in Norfolk. And this is the Slavery Abolition Act 1833, an act for the abolition of slavery throughout the British colonies, for promoting the industries of the manumitted slaves and for compensating the persons hitherto entitled to the services of such slaves. And staggeringly, it is the most expensive act that British Parliament ever passed. They actually purchased the slaves of everybody across the colonies. And it was unbelievably expensive. It was the only way they could get it through. It didn't include Sri Lanka, and it didn't include part of the of India, but it was then added to later in about 1846. Thomas Farr Buxton is buried in Overstrand Church, and if you look on the right-hand side as you walk into Overstrand towards the altar, there is his monument up there. And indeed, that is the one in Westminster Abbey. And I won't read all this out now, but there's endued with a vigorous and capacious mind, dauntless courage, and untiring energy, he was early led by the love of God to devote his powers to the good of man. It's very interesting having forebears like this. It gives you a rather a big sense of duty, so you rather feel you have to live up to it. Hence, when I became High Sheriff, I started reading up on what everybody else would have done in preparation. You should have about 3 years before you actually formally made it to actually prepare. I had 2 because I had to switch at the last moment. And what on earth does a High Sheriff do? It is the oldest position in the Constitution after the Crown. I went and looked at it in Cambridge at the Parker Library earlier this year, and I looked at a copy of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle from the 1850s, and in there is all a copy about a shireman, which then became the shire reeve, which then became the sheriff. And the sheriff was doing such a good job in Anglo-Saxon times that when the Normans took over, they continued the role. So what you were responsible for was law and order, raising taxes, and also raising the fiat, raising the army. And since Norman times, you've done it for about a year. That's why, when I go into schools, I ask everybody to hold up their hands. Who here has seen Robin Hood? Yep. Who was the Sheriff of Nottingham? He was the bad guy, yes? So I'm the bad guy for Norfolk. And it works really well. It helps break the ice. You are a volunteer. You are not paid anything. You are not paid expenses. It is all your time. By the way, I've done 22,000 miles so far in the last 11 months across Norfolk, which is quite a lot. It's a big county. And you are there to serve the county. And I believe that passionately. It is a humbling opportunity to actually serve others across the county. I'm now going to try to show you some of the things that I did. Aims. My aims when I came in were first to safely open up Norfolk post the pandemic. I was just talking to a couple of people there. I haven't succeeded in that. Norfolk County Council offices are still empty. When they are full, I will know that I have succeeded in it. Secondly, the traditional ones of the High Sheriff, to support the forces of law and order. So that is the police, the courts, both the Magistrates' Court and the Crown Courts. Is anyone here a magistrate? Congratulations. Thank you. By the way, I still think it's one of the most valuable things about seeing you during this year. I honour you. Magistrates' Courts, Crown Courts, Crown Prosecution Service, probation, the youth opportunity, the youth offending team, who do an extraordinarily good job, and the victim and witness service. Just to let you know that some cases of domestic abuse are taking 2 years to get to court. That means that the victim and witness service and the volunteers as well have to keep trying to keep those people trying to make sure that they take the case forward. And it's not happening. I'll come to that. My next priority was to focus on schools. Why? I got given a challenge by the Chief Constable. And it's a fascinating challenge. And at the end of this, after breakfast, please come back to me with any thoughts, because I would really like to know. And what his challenge was, we know in Norfolk where 50% of the crime is going to take place in 10 years' time. If it's predictable, why isn't it preventable? Let's have a think about that. This then led me to focus on adverse childhood experiences, schools, and the young people. And can we break that cycle of criminality? I strongly commend you, when you get home, to put into Google Adverse Childhood Experiences cartoon. It's about 5 minutes long. It shows what happens and the effect on very early years children of problems in their home. Drugs, alcohol, shouting, physical violence, but most of all, simply not feeling safe in their own bed. I had no idea that the chemical changes in those first 3 to 4 years will affect those people all the way through their lives. They are likely to die younger because of cancer. They are likely to have increased disease, let alone their life chances being considerably lower. And just to give you an example of that, a girl in a school in Norfolk was seen as always looking out of the window, and therefore she was judged for ADHD because she's clearly attention deficit. Must be, she's always looking out the window. What it is because school's the only safe place she feels safe in. And she's looking out of the window because she's worried about who else will come up to her. There was another case whereby there was a young person who, in school, was always turning up late for school, always asking to go to the toilet during the middle of the lessons, and not really paying attention. So the school teacher said, oh, clearly it's got the parents in, threatened to find the parents. What was it? He was a susceptible young boy. He was being beaten up on the way to school. That's why he was always late, because he was trying to avoid being beaten up. He was beaten up in the toilets during the breaks. That's why he's going there. We simply do not understand some of the concerns and the mental health concerns of the young, which are actually far worse post the pandemic. Lastly, my role is to support and highlight all volunteers. Norfolk is utterly astonishing. You all know about Chroma Cares here, which has done the most fantastic job. There are similar voluntary groups all over Norfolk, in all sorts of areas, in the most disadvantaged areas in Norwich, Kings Lynn, Thetford, Great Yarmouth. People have been astonishing in stepping forward to help. So I'm saying the bad things, but also the good things. And I'm finding the most wonderful people. Right, very quick show of various things that you do. Well, you support royalty. So that's Princess Anne at the Parody Monument to the Norfolks that was earlier this year. I had you get all the civics together to try to share best practice. I did it on Cromer Pier. By the way, it's the biggest gamble I've ever taken in my life. I'm not a gambler, but that was certainly the biggest gamble I ever took in my life. I was due to have it on the 1st of July because I was trying to open up Norfolk. We had to cancel it because Boris put it back and said you can't hold events then. So we came down on the 1st of July, and we bought a bottle with us just in case somebody had turned up. The 1st of July was hail coming horizontally across Cromer Pier, and the waves were breaking over it. And thankfully, 3rd of September, it was a beautiful day. You do things where you are put first. So that is giving a court award. That young lady is astonishing, and she saved somebody's life on the Great Yarmouth Road. And I have given court awards to 5 people who have done amazing things about saving life. One young woman came out of her flat and tackled 3 armed people with machetes attacking another boy underneath. She's 24 with a young child, and she went out and stopped them. I find that astonishing. I'm wondering how many of us would do that, trying to help and save others. I'm just highlighting the good of the people. The picture on the right is the Justice Service. Those are 4 High Sheriffs: Hertfordshire, Greater London, Norfolk and Cambridgeshire. And we've all worked together. All of the High Sheriffs across the Eastern region work together. I repeat, we're apolitical, but what we can do is bring influence to bear the more we work together. The High Sheriff on the left is wearing a traditional High Sheriff's uniform for a formal occasion. He is getting young magistrates under 30, he's trying to get 30% of magistrates under 30 in Hertfordshire. He won't achieve it, but he's having a really good go. And we're all working with him to try to get him to recruit younger magistrates. Religions. I have spent more time in church, I'm afraid to say, over the last year, despite this being a religious group, than I think I've ever spent in my life, because I have been going to more formal services during the week and visiting churches all the way across Norfolk. But what you'll be interested in, at the bottom left there, is the lady who runs the Hindu temple on the April Strait, the Roman Catholic bishop, the leader of the Buddhists, and the Muslim imam from the Ocean Road. So this is about bringing different communities. That was the opening of the new air ambulance at Norwich. And on the right, that is a justice service at Norwich Cathedral, and that is one of the High Court judges at the back there. And it gives me an opportunity to talk about courts. There are magistrates' courts in King's Lynn, Norwich and Great Yarmouth, which deal with 95% of the crime in this county. There are also county courts at King's Lynn and Norwich, and at the moment there is a High Court judge residing in Norwich trialling, I'm afraid, the murder of a baby, and that is being undertaken in the Crown Court in Norwich. And it has been a complete honour to sit in the courts and to see what has happened. The courts, and I'm not looking at anyone this is a completely apolitical statement, Duncan, the courts are in the most appalling situation. They are falling to bits. Physically, and also the delays on the courts are not good. Magistrates have caught up and are almost up to the same waiting time before the pandemic. Crown courts have got about another 2-year delay. Police. I'm trying to bring out things that are important out of each of these rather than showing a picture show. The police on the bottom left on that, I went round Norwich with for a day on foot. You see lots of people sleeping out in the streets of Norwich, don't you? Or you occasionally do see people sleeping out. None of them need to sleep out. There is a bed for every person. Norwich is extraordinary. There are resources to look after most of the people in Norwich. Some of the people on the streets earn a lot of money, and you will find there are prime positions for sitting there next to cash machines. Please do not give them money. They are making about £200 a day. Okay? The big issue sellers actually come up by train, the Romanian group come up by train each day from Ipswich. I find out all these things. I had no idea this existed. I was really worried about people sleeping on the streets. There are sufficient places in Norwich. They are not everywhere. I have to tell you, I went and cooked at the homeless shelter in King's Lynn one evening. By the way, one of the volunteers there was a Polish dentist, and I was asking her why, sorry I'm just checking on timing, why was she cooking? She said she'd been made so welcome into Norfolk, and that's so she wanted to give of her time to cook in the homeless, which I find, again, humbling. Just before Christmas, somebody turned up at the homeless shelter wanting a bed. Because of COVID, they can only take so many people. They had to turn them away. They told social services to come and help them. Somebody please pick him up. And he was found dead outside that door that morning. That is happening. I'm sorry. It is unforgivable that that is happening in this day and age, in this county. sorry, I'm quite angry actually. You can hear in my tone I've been finding out all sorts of things that just shouldn't happen. Environment. I walked across Norfolk with the Quakers and the Anglicans on part of the COP26 walk, which was fascinating. I learned more about what was going wrong with the environment in that, but I'd rather focus on the schools. I've been into now 35 schools and colleges across Norfolk, trying to find out what the issues are. There are issues. The mental health is better than it was. About 6 months ago it was really bad. The children are, some of the younger children are not growing up. They're finding the transition from junior school to high school really difficult. Teachers with 2 years experience have never taught in a classroom. Sorry, just putting that into perspective. In junior school, some of the children have spent half their lives in lockdown. Think about that. Lockdown has been good in certain ways, in that they've been able to use IT very well, but it's only some children. In rural areas, you can't get broadband signal. That's a problem. I've got so many things to talk about schools. If anyone wants to talk to me afterwards, I'd be delighted to do so. Community. The group on the top right are the Citizens' Advice. Citizens' Advice are not paid, they're all volunteers. They do an extraordinary job, and this was in Thetford, giving of their time, helping others. When I said the domestic abuse bill had come in, I got hugged by them, despite the fact we were all supposedly wearing masks. Domestic abuse has doubled in the last 2 years. Sorry, I'll say it again. Domestic abuse has doubled in the last 2 years. The pandemic has real issues and they're long-lasting. The group top left, that's Carrow Road. We slept out for the night for charity. Bottom left is teams trying to help young people who are dropping out of the system, because if we help young people who are dropping out of the system, they won't end up going into Norwich prison. Bottom right, sorry, you can't really see, it's dippy. We went and thanked all the volunteers from the blue light services by getting them to come into the cathedral and thank them personally as they came in. We've just done various different things with various different organisations. Again, I'm saying the volunteers have been fantastic. I had to put this in for today. Military, purely because of what's happening. Please do think of all the people at Marham, Milton Hall and Lake and Heath at the moment. They are all now on active service. Let's hope there's no accident. Youth clubs. Holt Youth Club Youth Project is fantastic, and the other one that is absolutely extraordinary is the bottom right, is the Swan Youth Project in Downham Market. What you can do as High Sheriff is you try to take good ideas from one part of the county and introduce it to others, so you try to make towns work better together. I know this sounds extraordinary. I was in Watton the other day, and with 7 different groups, and only 2 of them knew each other. And the vicar had not been able to get into the school, and there were real issues. So groups like this are really important because they get everyone to pull together, and these volunteers simply didn't know each other. And this has happened again and again across Norfolk. food and food banks. By the way, top right, again, so I'm looking hard at the watch, please shout if I need to cut it short, is another lovely idea just to show you how fantastic people are. That is the Dereham Library. It's the Dereham Knit and Natter or group who are taking 1950s and 1960s patterns for baby wear, knitting it, putting it on life-size dolls for dementia patients so that they think they're their own children wearing their own clothes from that time. I find that extraordinary. It's wonderful. I've actually passed that on to the Alzheimer's Society and encouraged all the other knit and natter groups across Norfolk to start doing the same, because it's constructively helping people and trying to help society. Right, I'm coming to the end. Prisons. There are 3 prisons here, and I've been lucky enough to go round with the Padres and with the governors of all 3 and present awards to prison staff for what they've achieved in lockdown. Bure at Coleshill is a sexual offences prison. There is Wayland at the top left, who's over near Watton, and simply cannot get staff. By the way, at the moment we have prisoners locked down because there aren't enough staff. And Norwich. Elizabeth Fry said that if you give people jobs and houses when they come out of prison, that is a way of trying to keep them out. Really good news is the latest prison white paper is driving that forward, and there's now an employment advisory board for Norwich Prison, and I was with them the other day, and the chair is the managing director of Lotus Cars, and they're actually looking at putting an evaluation and training centre specifically for those roles into Norwich Prison. So we are constructively trying to do things for it. The problem is COVID keeps going back into the prison, and you have to lock them down all day. So there are things happening that are really good. But please tell every young person you meet, going into Norwich Prison is rather like stepping back 150 years. It is brick Victorian prison with barbed wire. It is horrible. We should not still be sending people, so many people, to prison. Summing up, community really matters. Really matters. Social media can help, but it can also be extremely divisive. Next, we have to break the adverse childhood experiences cycle early. Home Start and ECFS, for those who know it, Early Child and Family Support, I believe implicitly is the way forward. Try to help and support families really early, and then support those mothers as they go into primary school to try to help take that forward. Ignatius Loyola was right. Those who know him, give me a child till he's 70, is mine for life. He was absolutely right. If we get the basics right early, there is a chance for the long term. School is the safest place. Exclusion is appalling. Does anyone know what the homeschooling statistics are? It is. You are allowed to take your child out of school. You're allowed to protest about it. By the way, the letter is going around Norfolk still, and we know it's the same letter because it's got the same spelling mistake on it. and it's put into all the head teachers, allowing you to take. So some of this is parents worried about COVID, but some of it is just people not wanting to school their children. They say they're going to do homeschooling, which is wonderful if you're in Cambridge and your parents are two dons. But if you're living in a caravan outside King's Lynn, you are not going to get homeschooled. The moment they leave the school, staggeringly, the state has no knowledge of where that child goes. I find that appalling. We're trying to sort it, I know, but it's a problem. Every time that a school excludes a young person and excludes them permanently, and they go to a short stay school, that child has a far higher chance of ending up in Norwich prison. Norwich prison, about 70% can hardly read and write. Social media is totally iniquitous. We need the Hidden Harms Bill really urgently. Children are attacked online through social media. Most worryingly, young boys as age as 10 are watching really hard pornography, which is leading them in turn to feel that they should dominate women, which in turn is leading to domestic violence and some of the sexual abuse that is happening. It is really important that everybody supports that. Support and help for young people. We were talking earlier about the young people in Norwich. Anything we can do to help and do supporting young people is really good. Prison should be a last resort, not a first one. And Elizabeth Fry's dictum still count for those coming out of prison. I hope I haven't bored on and taken far too long, but I just wanted to talk about the lessons that I've learned going around this county. I think it's a fabulous place. We're still far luckier here than any of the other counties in the Eastern region, let alone the United Kingdom. We are really lucky to live here, but the pandemic has caused problems and we need to take them seriously. Thank you. Please, any questions?
So Michael will now answer questions, and that was such an eye-opening and enlightening and stimulating talk, and it's I'm really impressed with the sort of care that you've been showing, and it's good to know all the good things that are going on. So I guess that raises all sorts of questions. So I'll bring the microphone round, and Mike will try and answer your questions. We'll answer your questions. Okay.
You alluded to your family motto. What is it, please?
No, I alluded to the family history. We have a number actually, so I've deliberately not used one, and but it's a long story. I'll brief you separately. Okay. By the way, I didn't go sufficiently on. I will push something while waiting for. If anybody wants a good book, Father Adrian Ling, who's one of the vicars at King's Lynn, gave me that in return for doing a talk for him on All Saints Church there. I have to say, and I'm not on commission from Mr. James Martin, who's a Jesuit, but it is the most wonderful book supporting Christianity, and it's been a wonderful read this year while I've been going round, because it keeps pulling me back to Christian principles as you go around and see all these different organisations.
Thank you, Michael. First of all, that was really interesting and enlightening. You said at the very beginning about the sense of duty that you'd inherited from your family and family history. You also said that you only get this gig for a year. I think that's right. So I'm just curious, what does an ex-high sheriff do with their time once they're no longer the sheriff?
I'm a deputy lieutenant, and funnily enough, the Lord Lieutenant, Lady Dannet, has already told me what I'm doing. Let's put it this way, I'm going to use the learnings of what I've learned this year to try to help Norfolk until I'm 75. So.
Thank you, Michael. That was really fascinating. One of the themes that you talked about was young people, whether it was young people affected by the pandemic, which, as a father to do young people, I know it's been a huge problem. I go around a lot of the schools as well, and you're absolutely right with what has happened to so many people. Youth clubs have died away enormously. The same theme comes out, whether it's in a youth club, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a community. It's often about leadership, and leadership can help change the fortunes of our young people. What is it that you would say to me is the key message to take back to the government and how we can support young people as we come out of this pandemic, who in so many ways have lost such a vital chunk of their life?
That's a fast ball. We were having a discussion earlier about mentoring. I actually think it's the strongest way forward, is you take people with lived experience who can actually be mentors. I found this about 15 years ago doing the Leggy programme, which I know is one of Tony Blair's initiatives. We got people who are ex-drug addicts to work with the drug addicts and the young alcoholics to get them off and to show how this was not a road that they should follow. Does anyone here know St Giles? St Giles is a really fantastic, they're ex-drug dealers and they're doing ex-county lines, and they explain how the whole thing works, but they're also talking to the young not to let them go down that in the first place. And I think mentoring through lived experience is the strongest way rather than anything else. That's why community is so important, because we all have to support through the community those leaders who come through. And so one of the problems is things like youth groups. Lots of people in the past who would run a youth group are worried about doing so now because of all the rules that stop them doing it. But also, Scout leaders are seen as, one Scout leader is done for paedophilia, and every Scout leader in the country is seen, despite the fact they are doing the most fantastic things for young people, they are all tarred with the same brush. And we have to stop this mixing of the two. So try to reduce the rules, encourage people to come forward, young people in their 30s and 40s, to be leaders and to help young people. And please, anybody else have their own ideas about that, because I'd be really interested to try to encourage more people to come forward as leaders, young youth leaders in the community. Teachers are very good at it. There was a teacher in Great Yarmouth who said to me at sixth form college there, who runs the CCF, and he says it's really interesting, you can just nudge. There's a whole lot of young who can go either way, and they're the ones literally on the brink. and you get them, and you put them into the CCF, it could be the Scouts, it could be anything, but helping other people, and suddenly they're away. But you're absolutely right, it's those young leaders.
Thank you, Michael. It's wonderful to be listening to you and hearing all that you had to say. Because I've got quite a big interest in the Gurney family, believe it or not. I was born in the Gurney house in Cromer, which Joseph Gurney built. And it's lovely to hear about Elizabeth Fry, because if anyone doesn't know, in the woods, just up on the Strand Road, there's a memorial to her. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yes, it's a stone memorial in the woods there, just below the country club, where Elizabeth Fry used to stand and preach. That's right. And it's anyone doesn't know, it's worth.
I never knew that. Thank you.
It's worth reading. And you mentioned about Thomas Fowler Buxton, and you're probably aware of this, but there's a very good book written about him called Thomas Fowler Buxton and the Liberation of the Slave, or Liberation of Slavery, written by, I've not his first name, but Martin Barclay, who was written about 15 years ago. A lovely book to read. It tells all about how he became a Christian and what he did afterwards. It's fantastic. And as I say, I find it particularly interesting because I was actually born in the house which Joseph Gurney built.
Thank you.
Which is very privileged, so I can count myself almost a partner. But it's wonderful to hear all you said. We have a tremendous Christian heritage in this area of your family, the Buxtons, the Barclays, and even going on to Gunton Hall with
Suffield.
Yeah.
They supported the Slavery Act.
Incredible man, and it's lovely to hear all about it. Thank you very much.
Nice talk, thank you.
Hello, Marcus. Thank you for your support judicially. I'm forbidden to make myself public in such a role, but I'm the errant magistrate in this gathering. I appreciate that your role is apolitical, as is mine. But given in view that our MP is sitting here this morning, what pressure can you bring to bear on behalf of the judiciary to our government to ensure that our judiciary is given the proper resources to enable justice to be local and immediate? Because you are indeed correct that the whole system is falling apart. I, like you, am totally unpaid. I've been doing this game for 30 years, and I have to tell you, in those 30 years, the recompense I get is a very modest expenses, and that amount was actually reduced, not increased in those 30 years. But I do it as a public service. But I have to tell you that such desperate is the state of the courts that I am on the phone nearly every day with the courts pleading with me to give yet more time. I could do the whole thing full time. Such is the desperate need. And I just fear that the whole justice system is in immediate danger of falling apart. What pressure can you bring to bear in your role, please?
Well, I've written to the Crown Prosecutor for England and Wales twice. I have spoken to the Lord Chief Justice at Southwark Cathedral with the other regional high sheriffs, and we had a call last night with one of the Norfolk MPs to try to persuade the Ministry of Justice to do various things around domestic violence. We are working together as all the high sheriffs, trying to do what we can, and I will be writing a end-of-term letter, if you call it that, to all the MPs across Norfolk, because I think it's important that they understand what the issues are here. And this has nothing to do with being political. It's just trying to say what the issues currently are. I think on here are what I see as the biggest issues. Crown Prosecution Service is in the most desperate state. They haven't gone back to work, so they're still working from home, so they aren't joined up. They're working regionally rather than locally, and there's a mismatch between police being Norfolk, judiciary Norfolk, and the Crown Prosecution Service being regional. Secondly, there is a shortage because the pay is so appalling, there are no defence barristers. Defence barristers aren't coming forward. If we aren't careful, there won't be judges coming forward in due course. Thirdly, the basic buildings are falling apart. I've had a meeting with the Eastern Region Delivery Manager together with the Chairman of the Bench, and that's how we started to get some of the work being done, but only because we had a meeting without coffee with her. We are doing whatever we can to make this happen. Apolitically, this is just about saying it doesn't matter, this is not party politics, this is just the courts have been starved of money for 20 years. If we do not support and defend them, we will have increasing issues in this country. Get off my soapbox.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to take up bring up something about the prison service. I know you've been around the 3 prisons. 5 years ago I was teaching in Wayland Prison. So I taught in the classroom. I went round the wings as well for in-cell learning. We had Way Out TV just coming out at that point in time. I also had the privilege of having all my lessons observed by Liz Trust, and she came round to know what she's doing now. But I wanted to know, I was a bit flabbergasted to hear they're still locked down 23 hours out of 24 a day.
It's when they get COVID, when COVID comes in, they have to lock down.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, there aren't the prison officers. Wayland is so short of prison officers because they are so badly paid that somebody on a meatpacking plant in Watton can earn a lot more than a prison officer. I'm sorry, why would you take all the rubbish of being a prison officer? And that girl was assaulted the other day again. A young prison officer was assaulted and nearly killed. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They deserve our support. They are public servants.
I know the difference the education system is also making. Do you know what's happening to bring that back so the prisoners can get back out off the wings?
Yes. We need it. Sorry. Yes, of course it's needed back. Everybody believes there's. I had a meeting with the new governor of Wayland week before last. We're trying to get it all back up again, but it's difficult, and it's difficult because of lack of people, and it's difficult because of COVID. And sorry, of course it should be. Of course it should be. We should be training people in prison. Sorry, I don't mean to be despondent here. I'm just saying this is the reality of what we're finding.
Right, thank you. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. John here welcomed me to come along. I'm most impressed. Going on to the prison stuff, I had an opportunity to work in the prison in the education department. I went for an interview quite a while back in Wales, funny enough, and it was to teach technology and digital stuff. I was most impressed with the facilities. I really got on well with the prisoners. The experience was really good, but like you said, the pay wasn't good enough. So travelling from Norwich to Wayland just didn't make any sense. So an opportunity there was missed because economically it wasn't viable. It's the only reason I didn't take the job. I also had the possibility to work in the Norwich prison. That wasn't so much the issue, it was more around the structure. But the probability and the opportunities and what you can give is huge.
Yes.
I really like the programme. And it stems back to what you say to kids, going back in the formative years, college, etc. I'm a lecturer, I teach now, I work with young kids. So everything I'm hearing today is most important as us as men take responsibility to protect their well-being and nurture whatever role you play in society.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I agree completely.
Thank you for everything you do for our community. I'm going to be brave here and speak on behalf of my 15-year-old daughter. She has COVID PTSD. She's frightened to leave the house. She hasn't been to school for many weeks. We are getting a little bit of help from One Norfolk, Just One Norfolk. We've been passed on to MAP, but we don't know when she'll get any help. Is there more funding going into mental health services for children? And are you aware of a number of children that have a similar condition to her, not only in Norfolk, but 350,000 children in the UK, I believe, that suffer from a similar condition?
It's got an awful lot better in Norfolk, funnily enough. Over the last 6 months, I was saying mental health really has got better. The mental health services are broken completely. The best schools are the ones that some schools have mental health on the senior management team and are making a big difference. Most schools don't, and most schools, the pastoral care is mixed. Some are good, some are not. I have met with the new chair of Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust, who I have an awful lot of time for. She's come from Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary. She's coming in with very clear, open eyes, and she's trying to see what can be done. And I cannot speak politically, but I will say, Tim, wherever you are, one of the things I think works really well, and it may not be for your daughter, and sorry, I don't know her circumstances, but the early help hubs are really, really good. South Norfolk doing their early help hub is working really well. What isn't working well is at the moment NSFT working with South Norfolk's early help hub, but that is being solved so that you will get physical health and mental health. But if you go to a doctor, you might well not be given a pill, you'll be given the address of the running club or the group who can actually help you. And this is about community working all together and social therapy, and that is working really well. And I'm really impressed with what they're achieving. And I'm going back to have another look at it. And I think that is one solution, is actually working, this is just how you deliver that mental health support into the community, which means that people can access it in an easier way.
I think we've just got time for one more question, as we did say we'd finish at 10, but I'll just see what Simon wants to add to that.
Say about prisons, we received a letter from the school to say we'll either pay a fine or go to prison, just so you're aware we're actually getting that, which is not very supportive from the school, and I understand the county council have to go through procedures, but it didn't help in our situation because we're really struggling with the circumstances. But I'll talk to you about
Yes, please do talk to me.
So maybe one more question now, before we finish. Anybody?
It all seems to me to hinge around money. And, we need plenty of money. We don't have a magic money tree,
No.
which they all
Agreed,
about.
agreed completely.
And that's all I can say, really. It's
No, no.
because cash grab. And
And
this war starting is going to be worse.
correct.
All I get is gas bills going up. And upsets me right terribly at the moment. She's a little bit balanced like this through this COVID and everything else.
I agree completely. So I'm going to agree with you, and as I go around everyone, there is no magic money tree. There's no magic solutions. Sorry, nobody's going to be able to produce money. Sorry, the government's money comes from us. Sorry, there's no miracles here going to happen. What does happen, what I've hoped I've tried to bring out, is a lot of this is how we do it. Justice system needs more money. Sorry, that's just it is a foundation stone to society, which is why it needs to be looked after properly. But a lot of these other bits and pieces are actually about how communities work together and how they deliver it. The self-help hubs in South Norfolk are costing far less because people are not being given expensive drugs. And the NHS is saving money because actually a lot of people who are going on to drugs are finding social therapy rather than physical therapy. It's about trying to find other solutions within our community to help each other. Dare I say it, this is a perfect example of this, isn't it? We're all together, we're sharing ideas, we can all help each other, and we're bringing up questions and ideas, and all of us can help others. I now know that you get far more out of volunteering. You get far more back than what you put in. Let's all go out and help others rather than anything else, because nobody from outside is going to has a magic money tree. So thank you for that, and I agree completely.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for that really inspiring and eye-opening talk. That's absolutely amazing, and I think we've all learned so much, and I think it's probably changed the way we think about what's going on in our society. So thank you very much indeed.